Hi everybody, welcome to Langer at the Mic. I'm Mike Langer. I hope you had a wonderful Canada Day long weekend and a very happy 4th of July. Kent Hughes and Vinny Lecavalier met with the Montreal media yesterday and I broke it all down. You can check it out right here. I'll be doing a final Shane Wright versus Wright-Slafkovsky and Logan Cooley video right before the draft, plus a live discussion with all of your comments. But in this video, we'll be talking about prospects that the Habs could target with picks number 26 and 33, or in a trade-up scenario. In the last couple of months here and on Twitter, I've been saying that the Habs don't necessarily need to rely on accumulating a bunch of lottery picks by finishing close to last place just to build a contending team. They also need to find gems in the late first round and middle rounds of drafts as well. So here are my 7 favorite boom or bust prospects of this year's draft that could be available to the Canadians at 26 and 33rd overall. Not necessarily based on ranking, but more based on who I think has the highest upside and who will be overlooked for their weaknesses. And I'm going to do the best I can to find some of those gems for the Montreal Canadiens in this year's draft. At number 7, TRISTAN, a right-handed two-way defenseman on the Gatineau Olympics in the QMJHL. He's from Trois-Rivières, so he's a Quebec-born player, of course, playing in the Q. 6'2", 170-ish pounds. He's tall but thin, but still very physical. Scouts say that he is a really good passer, really great at making that first breakout pass. He has really high-end puck skills, and that gives him a lot of upside. But LUNEAU could get overlooked because of his skating, specifically his speed and explosiveness, and a lower body injury he suffered this past season. I'm personally not as worried about LUNEAU's injury as I am about his lack of skating, but if he develops it, then perhaps with his great puck moving ability, his poise, and if he fills out his 6'2" frame, perhaps LUNEAU could turn into, at best, a number 2 or number 3 right-handed defenseman. At number 6, defenseman Sam RINZEL, a big 6'4", two-way right-handed defenseman in high school in the US. He played at Chaska High School and with the Waterloo Blackhawks in the USHL and a bunch of other levels this year. Scouts say he is a very skilled, creative, above average skater. He uses his long reach in the defensive zone, but he seems to be very raw. It sounds like he has a lot to work on, but he has that skill and that creativity with the puck on his stick as a defenseman. And like I mentioned, he played mostly in high school this past season, so he could just get overlooked because of the fact that he played mostly in high school and not a lot against high-end competition. But again, if he pans out, then he would be a tremendous big right-handed defenseman, again, above average skater already at that size, quite impressive. And if he just fills out his frame, his 6'4" frame, and maximizes his offensive ability, then he could also be a really good number 2 or 3 defenseman at best in the NHL. But of course, if he doesn't pan out, then he might just be a bottom pairing guy, or just he might not even make the NHL at all. At number 5, FILIP, an undersized right winger from Slovakia at 5'10", 174 pounds. Scouts say he is highly skilled, very creative, excellent with the puck on his stick, an amazing skater, very smooth, very agile. He has a deceptive shot, but doesn't have the best shot selection. And he could get overlooked due to his lack of size and also his lack of production against men. He was a point per game player at junior levels, but when he played against men in Slovakia the last couple seasons, his production hasn't been as great. But it seems that his skill is definitely there. The creativity, the playmaking, the stick handling, moves, offensive creativity is all there for FILIP, and if he pans out, he could pan out to be a really great offensive player in the NHL. Great, maybe not a goal scorer, but perhaps close to a point per game player at best. But at worst, again, he doesn't quite figure it out in North America and just doesn't quite pan out as an NHL player and might not have a long career in the NHL. That is the low end of his potential, in my opinion. At number 4, MATTIAS HAVELID, an undersized offensive defenseman, a right-handed offensive defenseman from Sweden. I think he's more of a guy that would be a better option at pick number 33 or sometime in the second round. He just sounds like such a fun player. Scouts say he is a great skater, both in terms of speed and agility. He is creative with the puck on his stick, and in terms of making plays, he is a really skilled puck handler, and he is fearless despite his lack of size. But he will likely get overlooked for his lack of size that I mentioned, his lack of defensive IQ, and lack of patience, as in sometimes looking for the more complicated play instead of the more simpler play. But those are things that, in my opinion, can be coached. But based on Havelid's high-end speed and agility and skill at the puck on his stick and offensive creativity, look, I know it's a stretch to compare him to Cale Makar, who just won the Norris and Conn Smythe this past season. I know it's a stretch to compare a projected second or third round player out of Sweden to Cale Makar. But just again, if the speed is there for Havelid, if the speed and skill is there as a defenseman for MATTIAS HAVELID, then I'm not saying he'll become what Cale Makar is, Norris Trophy, Conn Smythe winner, but Havelid could still be a very productive offensive defenseman in this league. At very best, in this modern NHL of defensemen that need to be skilled and fast, MATTIAS HAVELID sounds like he just fits that mold, and based on his offensive traits and his traits as a skater, if he cleans up his defensive side of his game and figures out how to succeed despite his lack of size, perhaps he can reach that potential of being a top offensive defenseman. But if he doesn't, then at worst he could be perhaps another Victor Mete, or maybe even Matthias Norlinder, who still has a lot of time to figure it out, but hasn't quite figured it out in North America just yet. At number 3, CALLE ODELIUS. He is a left-handed, two-way, and puck-moving defenseman, also from Sweden. Scouts say he's great in terms of his agility and ability to evade forecheckers. He's also a very strong passer and has very high-end, all-around hockey sense. The reason ODELIUS could get overlooked, though, is for his lack of defensive positioning at times and his lack of physicality. For the Montreal Canadiens, who already have a ton of young left-handed defensemen in their system in Romanov and Guli and Jordan Harris, the need for ODELIUS might not be there. But if his offensive skill and upside, or puck moving ability, I should say, is true, along with his all-around hockey sense in a system that Kent Hughes, Marty St. Louis and company want to preach hockey sense, high-end hockey sense, then ODELIUS could fit right in with that. At number 2, Denton MATEYCHUK, a dynamic left-handed offensive defenseman in the WHL. Scouts say he is a great skater, has high-end offensive creativity, a quick release, and great shot intelligence from the point in terms of his ability to get pucks through traffic from the blue line. He's also an aggressive defender, takes a lot of chances, takes a lot of risks, but is very adaptable. He was a point-per-game player in the WHL last year with Moose Jaw. He could end up being taken ahead of the Montreal Canadiens pick at 26, but he also could get overlooked for his lack of size and the aforementioned risk-taking tendencies. But again, just that offensive upside, if MATEYCHUK falls to 26 or to wherever the Montreal Canadiens end up picking in the late first round, then he would be an amazing get for the Habs, who have a lot of solid two-way defensemen in their system. Again, Romanov, Harris, Guli, who I mentioned, very solid two-way overall, all-around ability, but they're still lacking that high-end offensive defensive prospect. Norlinder's there, I get it, but he hasn't, again, quite figured it out in North America just yet, and that's where Denton MATEYCHUK could be a tremendous pick for the Montreal Canadiens late in the first round if he projects to be that that high-end offensive defenseman. He could also fall off, and like I mentioned with HAVELID, he could end up being another Victor Mete, but he could also be possibly a very productive offensive player in the NHL. Now, my number one boom or bust prospect for the Montreal Canadiens late in the first round or early in the second round is JAGGER, a scoring winger from the WHL, same team as DENTON MATEYCHUK, who I just mentioned, the Moose Jaw Warriors, and the same team as Brayden Point, interestingly enough. First of all, JAGGER has one of the coolest names in this entire draft class, but he also has just so much risk versus reward potential. Scouts say he has a great shot, and offensive creativity and stick handling. He showed off that shot when he won MVP of the CHL Prospects game this past season. Now, in comparing him to Brayden Point, which is easy to because they both played on the Moose Jaw Warriors in the WHL, FIRKUS didn't have a 91 point in 72 game season like Point had at 18 years old, but FIRKUS's production this past season was similar to Brayden Point when he was 19 years old, where Brayden Point put up 87 points in 60 games, whereas FIRKUS this past year put up 80 points in 66 games. Now, FIRKUS will definitely get overlooked for his lack of not so much height, but more so weight at 5'10" and only 155 pounds. He also lacks high-end skating speed for his lack of size, a little bit inconsistent in the playmaking department, and there's also questions as to whether or not his past season with the Warriors was an anomaly. Can he keep up that production going forward? Not just at the NHL level, but at the junior level and the minor league levels. But if he does sustain his production for another year or two of junior and carries it over to the pro level and ultimately the NHL level, then perhaps FIRKUS has the potential to become a high-end offensive player in the NHL. And that is why I think it would be worthwhile for the Montreal Canadiens, or any team for that matter, to take a risk on JAGGER. So those are my top 7 boom or bust prospects the Canadiens should consider at 26 or 33rd overall should they choose to stay there. But now here are 3 players that could fall and that the Habs should trade up to the teens for. Number 3, Brad Lambert, a forward from Finland. He has huge, speaking of risk versus reward, he has huge risk versus reward potential because, I mean, his name has just been up and down draft boards for the last couple months, as high as the top 5, as low as in the 20s. Scouts say he has great speed, great skating, agility, skilled with the puck on his stick, great vision. He's been deemed as one of the most skilled players in this draft, but could fall because of his lack of offensive or overall consistency and his play away from the puck, which is what really concerns me. And that's why I don't know if I'd want to trade up for Brad Lambert. I would definitely be content with the Canadiens if they stayed put at 26 and Brad Lambert happens to fall that far, and the Canadiens have pick 33, of course. I would be more than happy, I'd be ecstatic if the Habs take that risk at one of those picks on Brad Lambert, but I don't think he's going to fall that far, and I don't know if I'd want to give up too many assets to trade up for him, but the Canadiens should definitely look into it if Brad Lambert starts to fall. The second player the Habs should trade up for if he falls is Isaac Howard, an undersized scoring winger with the US National Development Program. Scouts say he is a natural goal scorer with a great shot and is willing to go to the dirty areas to score despite his lack of size. He's also a great skater in terms of speed and agility, and also has underrated playmaking ability as well. But he could get overlooked for his lack of size at 5'10", 183 pounds, which, you know, we can't help but draw comparisons to him and Cole Caulfield. Now, Cole Caulfield obviously was a much more productive player than Howard was with the US National Development Program, but also fell due to his lack of size at 5'7". Now, Isaac Howard is a little bit bigger than Caulfield was and still is. Howard is 5'10", 183 or so pounds, but doesn't have the same goal scoring ability, but maybe it could still translate to the NHL level. And I think he'll definitely get drafted in the teens, but if he starts to fall below 15, then perhaps the Montreal Canadiens will be in a place where they can trade up for him. And I think they definitely should, for his ability to be a goal scorer. And again, might not translate the same way Caulfield has translated so far in his time at Wisconsin and in the NHL. Howard will have a chance to develop at the University of Minnesota in Duluth. But yeah, I still think the Montreal Canadiens would still be well off to trade up for him if he does fall to the later teens. Now, the number one prospect who I think could fall and the Montreal Canadiens should trade up for if he does fall is Frank Nazar, a two-way forward, also from the U.S. National Development Program. He's another player that scouts say has great speed, great agility. You can tell which players that I am interested in, or I would be interested in if I were the Montreal Canadiens. Nazar has great speed, great agility, great vision, creativity, and playmaking. A dynamic competitiveness, just sounds like a Brendan Gallagher type player who just is high motor nonstop whenever he's on the ice. And he also has all-around ability as a two-way forward and also brings intangibles to the table as well. But again, could be overlooked for his lack of size and perhaps also his decision making with the puck. That could see him fall to the teens, but he is still a dynamic offensive or dynamic two-way player that if he falls, the Montreal Canadiens should definitely consider trading up for. So there you have it, 3 players who I think the Montreal Canadiens should trade up for if they fall to the later teens, and 7 players who I think the Montreal Canadiens should take risks on if they fall to 26th or 33rd overall and the Habs stay put. Who are some of your favorite prospects that the Habs should target in the late first and early second round? And who should the Habs realistically trade up for if they fall into the late teens? Let me know in the comment section below. But as usual, if you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe, give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Mike Langer for both. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time. Go Habs, go.